Okay, we'll keep going with this tournament. Nice cast of players. Now, we're kind of seeing each of these players, let's say we're seeing a play style. And the a6 bet, I'm kind of giving it credit. It could just be a sloppy bet. It could also be a very smart bet. It's tough to know without reading the guy's mind. But yeah, here we have ace, queen, fives, 4-3 three-way. And let's quickly talk through the incentives of each player. So Kristen, she doesn't realistically want the pot to grow. She can face a very small bet, and that's it, before it's too big for her hand. Similar for Connor and similar for Clemens. So basically all the guys here at this stage are aiming for a similar pot size, but the hands are so borderline, very easily any of them could bluff. And in terms of narrative, because this board is low and connected, it's not a good one for Clemens, so very likely he's not going to fire out. Yeah, looks like neither is Connor, and then we see the turn, and kind of everyone's still aiming at the same pot size, so there's a decent chance you see like small bet call, and then check down the river or something like this. Clement, sometimes he improves and wants a really big pot, but the rest of the time his ace queen high would really like as little as possible going in. So yeah, Kristen goes 8K, 1/3. Exactly the pot size her hand is aiming for. Clement's going to call because it's his pot size, and Connor presumably is going to call because that's his pot size. But he decides to fold. Now, it's actually a nice fold in the sense that, if it were heads up, we'd say cool, right? But once Kristen aimed at the spot and Clement called, he's like, I need to actually beat both of these and not get bluffed, and that gets unlikely with fives. So he thinks, I think in terms of hand strength, his hand is not good enough. And I think this is a bit of a mistake and an important one in the sense of you call 8 to win 48 and you improve to a straight on a 4 and a boat on a 5. Sure, sometimes there's going to be a flush when you make a straight, but there are like 6 cards that improve you. And given the bet's very small, I think that kind of does it. It is enough. It's not king 5. So I would have liked to see him call, and then here on the 4, very likely we see check. To imagine these guys do something else. Okay, Kristen. So this is very astute by Kristen. So the reason for her to bet this small is if she thinks her opponent has ace, king, ace, queen, ace, jack high a lot. Now, she happens to be correct. I'm not sure she's generally correct about this, but she read her opponent correctly, that he would need to be not very deceptive. So this is a deception part of, he would need to have bet his pairs on the flop or raise them on the turn for this bet to make sense. But it's kind of small enough where it's okay. And look at Clement, he's like, I need to find a bluff to call this. And he doesn't think that's likely, so he folds. But of course, he should also consider raising, like always. And then think, what story am I telling? Ace 5, pocket 5s, like pocket 4s. You can tell a story there. So I'm not saying he should raise, but just that he should think about it. We don't know all the dynamics and all the things going on here. And all these hands where people feel like they don't consider raising too much are a really big contrast to the online final table that we have, where there's a really big hand where both players are constantly turning their hand into a bluff raise over and over again, kind of constantly recognizing the shift and going for the aggressive option that a lot of these guys, I don't know if they're not considering it or just not deciding on it, but we haven't really seen that yet. And of course makes you a much tougher guy to play against, especially when it's time drive. Yeah, we have Queen 10 against Queen 10, and those are always cool hands to watch when the players miss, when they hit. So Ace 4-3, and we think narrative. Again, if we're 100 deep, this is better for Clement because he called, and then he has like high density of low pairs and suited connectors and stuff. This stack depth, it gets closer, and yeah, again, it's a spot where whoever bets is going to win. Neither one of these guys wants to show down. And Kristen makes a small bet, and here Clement, I would expect, would just fold, which is a technical fold. Of course, if you think that she's out of line for some reason, you can call it a bluff or bluff raise, but that would be quite loose considering the hand's so disconnected from the board. Okay, ace king suited, 7-8 offsuit, calling the button very loose. I don't know what prompted this, and 10-9 off in a big blind makes sense. And this hand's going to be super straightforward. At some point, Kristen will bet, and then everyone will fold. But no, I'm actually wrong. So Kristen, when you think about the pot size she wants with ace king here, it's not necessarily all the chips, because she needs someone to call her with a worse ace, and there are better hands out there, like hands with a 5. So she actually goes deceptive, and probably she's going to be like check flop and then bet twice. That's her plan. And this actually induces a bluff from Connor, who's going to take a shot at the pot. Think of the very interesting context in the sense that Connor, to make this bet, let's say, very often would need to have a 5 or a good ace. And you could say it's tough for him to have a 5 because he flatted the button. Which 5s would he have? But then he has 7-8 off, so who knows what he's playing. Maybe it's easy for him to have a 5. And Kristen is, again, navigating to her pot size of choice. And she might think, again, it's very hard for Connor to have a 5. The big blind could have had a 5, but how can Connor? Very rarely. So she's like, pressure your ace and let's put tons of money in. And against him, maybe she's willing to go for all of it. And unfortunately for her, she runs into a bluff and gets a fold. That's not what you're going for, right? You're aiming for a bigger pot size than that, but yeah, happens. Sometimes you're happy to get the fold, but this time her hand had kind of a lockdown on such a dry board. But yeah, play still makes sense. And we're going to have ace jack versus 10-9 and ace 5-5 again. So check and ace jack again could sometimes check back, right? Because it's such a dry board. And the big blind has tons of 5x, so he's just being more careful. And now he starts betting to get his pot size, and at this point, Kristen probably is done. I'm saying this just because, technically speaking, people try to have a piece of the board when they're bluffing. Of course, she could bluff and would have put him in a very tough spot. Let's make this the last hand of this video, assuming it gets to the flop. So we have ace-queen opening and king 10 presumably flatting. Oh, she's in the small blind, so closer, but probably still flatting. Maybe 3-betting, we'll see. Remember, you can re-raise hands that you can flatten. We didn't want the middling parts in there. And Kristen with a much more accurate re-raise size. If you remember before, we had someone going 6K and the other guy 14K. Here it's 7K and 23K. So this is more the size you want here. And Aram can kind of call or shove. I think he's supposed to shove quite often, technically speaking, but I'm not even sure. It's kind of close. He's counting his chips, right? How many chips you have matters a lot in this decision. Have a call, looks like. And yeah, this is going to be interesting regardless, because there's 52K in and 83 behind. And how big of a pot do you want? And the answer is all of it for both of these guys. Both of these guys, there's so much in the middle, you just go for all of it. So I don't know the way that they're going to go about this, but almost certainly all the money's going to go in unless both of these guys are tricky at the same time. And it runs out really weird. And Kristen, I mean, she's not super duper happy. And, had there been little behind, she might have been aiming for less. But yeah, this check, she might even be check shoving. It's not necessarily a pot control check. Or if it goes check, she probably goes big bet and then shove the river on bricks. Aram, let's see how deceptive he is. Is he going to wait around with his ace queen? Which you could, right? He wants all the money in the middle. On most runouts, again, there's not enough behind where you worry too much about how the runout comes. So yeah, he just fires a big bet. So very, very direct about this. And I would imagine Kristen going all in, but I could see a call as well. And the reason is just getting anything to fold is so valuable with this amount of money behind. So now she turns a gut shot, and whereas if we were very deep, Aram should be concerned about the 9 and the fact that some hands improve to beat him. Here it's more, Jack 10, Queen, Jack, King 10, 9, 7, 8 hands pick up equity, so you're just more likely to stick it in and just hope for the best. And Kristen here has a kind of technical call, but you can see her debating with herself, because what she's thinking is that I don't think he's going to do this with worse, so my hand is just a bluff catcher with equity. And then in theory land, maybe her hand is always a call, because theory land has your opponent doing everything in this perfect proportion of ways. But in practical land, start thinking, is he actually bluffing enough? Would he even bluff? And Kristen makes a really nice, I'm saying really nice laydown, because she was beaten, and the practicality matters. You're not playing against a computer, and maybe she got lucky to make that fold, but maybe it was a very astute fold against someone who would not really be bluffing in that way, right? King Jack got there, would Ace Jack have bet the flop? And you just start thinking about it like that, and maybe you reach the fact that no, he just has me beat too much. A very nice hand. I guess we'll make this one the last hand, because we're already in. So King 10 versus Queen 9. Queen 9, what's too big given positions, and Ace King on the board. King 10 can throw a tiny bet, and that's it.